Hi everyone, my name is Ángel Beltrán Pérez and today I'm presenting the lecture Spanish Cross-Linguistic Influence in Oral Production among English and Italian second level UJAT learners. The co-authors of this study are Professor Veronika de la Cruz Villegas and Eduardo Jesús Gordillo Fuentes. The topics I'm presenting consist of the problem, the purpose, the research question, the hypothesis, the significance of the study, and the theories used. In a second moment, I will be talking about the methodology of the proposal and presenting some preliminary results according to the literature review. To start with, what is cross-linguistic influence? This influence is defined as the cognitive process of applying the knowledge of one language to that of another. That is to say, using certain elements that exist on one language on the performing of another language. The research problem arises from my language learning experience in which I saw some of my classmates using certain patterns, using certain elements that did not belong to the languages they were aiming to perform. Then, this mixture of vocabulary, morphology, syntax, and pronunciation could be a problem for learners to reach the target language, to reach a standard version of the target language. Moreover, and according to Gabriel, Loning, and Montreuil in 2010, they said that all the transfer effects tend to be more prominent, more concurrent when learners are in a low proficiency level, when they are just starting to learn a language. Now, the purpose of this study is to know how the L1 features can contribute to a transfer, to an influence effect on the L2 that in this case is English and the L3 that in this case is Italian on UJAT learners that are taking the second university level. To reach that purpose, we're going to analyze the speech of L2 English and L3 learners in order to identify the L1 features that cause an influence or a major influence on the oral performance of these learners. Finally, an identification of how the L1 affects positively or negatively the L2 is going to be carried out. Our concerns on this research consist of three main ones that are the linguistic domains shaped, how CLIs shapes the oral production, and what language elements suffer from transfer from the L1 to the target language of the population we are using on this proposal. We also state that phonology and syntax are the linguistic domains shaped the most by the L1 on the L2. Moreover, in the case of the Italian as a target language, we hypothesized that the L1 syntax and morphology would modify most the performance of this language. Some important findings during the literature review are presenting now that serve as a support to this study. The first one consists of that few studies addressed the oral production when researching the CLI. Only 2 papers that were carried out by authors as Magnus and Marsden and Shaw in 2019 showed this thematic. The other studies were interested in aspects as the language acquisition, the relative clauses, the metalinguistic awareness, among others. Secondly, and according to to Funk and Murphy in 2016, they said that more research had to be done to reveal what language element might be more vulnerable to the CLI phenomenon, which is one of the concerns of our study. The third important finding was that according to Yukin Wang in 2017, she said that the language transfer phenomenon at that moment had not been sufficiently explored yet. Owing to that, this proposal helps to fill a gap in research. Finally, zero studies addressed the cross-linguistic influence phenomenon with the Italian language. Other languages, as Spanish, French, and Chinese, were found to be considered as a source of transfer or a recipient of transfer on those papers. However, this shows a certain lack of research addressing the Italian language. Owing to that, it shows a certain lack of research that use the Italian language. And this study will serve to fill a gap using the Italian language as some of the ones studied. The theoretical foundations of this study consist of three main theories, which are the contrast analysis, the error analysis, and the interlanguage. The contrast analysis was first proposed by Lado in Linguistics Across Cultures. And at that moment, they stated that the more similar a language element is, the easier to learn. And the more different a language element is, it would be the more difficult to learn. That strong version of the contrast analysis said that the mother tongue was the main and only source of transfer on the target languages. However, when Chomsky proposed the universal grammar, that strong version of the theory was abandoned. Now, this weak version of the contrasting analysis, as it can be summarized here by Tajare in 2015, it says that limited knowledge of the L2 will cause a recourse to the L1. And owing to the differences that those languages have, it would maybe cause a difficulty in learning the L2. When it comes to this theory, in a strong version, it was concerning on predicting the errors learners could do when performing a language. Now, as an alternative to the contrastive analysis, the error analysis was proposed. Now, the error analysis focuses on describing the errors actually committed by learners, and it also proposes that the mother tongue is not the only and main source of errors committed by learners. One of the disadvantages of the contrastive analysis was that theory focused on describing the errors that the learners would do. However, some of those errors were not actually committed by the learners. This error analysis focuses on describing those errors, the type of error, the frequency, among others. In addition, it proposes that those errors can be caused by the target language itself. It doesn't have to do exactly to the mother tongue. And the errors can be also caused by the applied communicative strategies as well as the type and quality of the second language or target language instruction. This analysis is basically the study of kind and quantity of errors that occurs, particularly in the fields of applied linguistics. All these errors can be divided into subcategories: overgeneralization, incomplete rule application, and the hypothesizing of false concepts. All these categories reflect a learner's competence. They differ from learner to learner. Finally, the interlanguage was proposed after the error analysis. And this interlanguage says, and according to Selinker in 1969, that it is a separate linguistic system based on the observable output which results from a learner's attempted production of a target language norm. That is to say that this interlanguage is a continuum between the mother tongue or the languages previously learned or acquired and the target language a learner is aiming to learn. We can also say that this interlanguage is a non-started version of the target language that only exists on the learner's mind. This interlanguage is developed by a learner of a second language who has not become fully proficient yet, but is approximating the target language, preserving some of the features of their first language, or overgeneralizing target language rules in speaking or writing in the target language and creating innovations. Nowadays, the contrastive analysis and the error analysis cannot be used isolated in a research, since they both complement each other. And it is also worth to mention that in aspects of the morphology and the phonology, the contrastive analysis can provide a good explanation of the errors committed. When it comes to the methodology of this study, a mixed approach is going to be used with an exploratory design. This is going to be applied on the BA in Modern Languages at Universidad Juárez, Autónoma de Tabasco, with one group of second-level students that are taking English and Italian as their L2 and their L3 respectively. It is also worth to mention that these learners had taken a four-language learning when they were on their first university level. After that, they had to choose between French and Italian as their L3, and they also have to take the English language as an obligatory subject during the rest of their university formation. As regards the instruments of this study, interviews and tasks will be used. The tasks are going to provide the quantitative data, and the interviews are going to provide the qualitative data. Finally, and according to the literature review, some preliminary results are presented. These preliminary results basically say that the transfer is going to be found, especially negative transfer. This is based on the fact, and according to Odling in 1989, that said that owing to limited linguistic knowledge, at the initial state of learning, negative transfer is more concrete than any other kinds of transfer. And also, as proposed by our hypothesis, phonology and syntax are expected to be shaped most by the L1 on the L2, that is English, while the L1 syntax and morphology are predictive to modify the L3 performance. Here are some of the references used during the presentation of this proposal. And this was the lecture Spanish CLI in oral production among English and Italian second level UJAT learners.